Hey folks, and welcome to Typology, the show in which we explore the mystery of the human personality through the lens of the Enneagram. My name is Anthony Skinner. I'm the producer and co-host of this show, and today we are rolling out the mailbag. We've got a bunch of good Q&A conversation from Ian, and these questions are some carryovers from our Typology Institute membership webinar that we have once a month. It's really exciting. You get on the call with us, and it's beyond Q&A because you get to have conversations with Ian and with each other. It's really great. So shout out to Typology Institute membership. So these questions are some of the carryover from that webinar we do monthly, and we thought we would pull the questions into the show and share them with you all. I'm sure you're going to enjoy this, and so let's bring on the man of the hour, your Typology podcast host, Ian Cron. Ian, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. We're sitting here in Typology Central in our studio.
That's
and
right.
I got my dogs, Percy and Pip, laying on the floor behaving themselves. And we better get to the questions because I don't know how long that's going to last.
They were wrestling a minute ago, and now they're laying down. This is great. Perfect timing. Of course, we're asking some questions that were left over from our Typology Institute membership webinar. So I got a couple for you here. We're calling this our mailbag episode today. So this is from Andrew. Does trauma impact the way we deal with different emotions? I am a 2, and I have had a confusing relationship with anger, overdue or underdue. It makes me wonder if trauma has any impact on this.
You know, I think it can, and I think stress can in the immediate moment. I think for 2s, when you're not accustomed to asking, when you're not used to asking others to meet your needs, when you're out of touch with your own needs, and it's hard for you to ask others, right? What can happen is when you finally get to doing it, you can overdo it.
Right.
It can become too intense. You could be feeling some latent anger that others haven't been attuned to your needs and meeting them.
Right.
And then, so when you start to stick up for yourself, you overdo it, right?
That makes total sense.
Yeah, and the rest of the time for 2s, underdoing anger because it might disturb relationships
Feels threatening.
Would be threatening.
Yeah, that's really good. All right, this is Wendy, and she says, I wonder if some numbers absorb trauma in a different way than other numbers. I'm a 3, and I don't feel as impacted by the exposure to trauma.
Yeah, that's a good question.
It is a good question.
Yeah, I think every person deals with trauma differently. I think the Enneagram can help in some way to be predictive, right? Like, okay, don't be surprised if a 7 responds to trauma this way or that way, different types. We have to remember trauma is a powerful force, and it's not, we're not necessarily bound exclusively by the rules of type.
Right.
However, that being said, I think 3s it's not surprising me that a 3 would not feel as impacted by exposure to trauma as other types. However, I might frame it out like this, right? That 3s may not be as in touch with the effect of trauma in their lives as other types.
I love when you explain that with the feeling triad.
Yes. So 3s are the type that have the most difficulty recognizing their own feelings and those of other people.
Which might surprise people because they're in the feeling triad, right? Surrounded by the 2 and the 4.
Right. Well, the 2 is very attuned to the feelings of others. 4s are very attuned to their own feelings. 3s are kind of asleep to feelings, and they have just trouble identifying what it is that they're feeling. So a 3 actually may not draw a line between what they're feeling and its root in trauma.
Right. Oh, that's good. Good. Great one.
Hey everybody, one of the lessons I've learned over the years is that not everybody benefits from a traditional 50-minute counseling session. And this is why some people can go to couples therapy or personal counseling for a long time and never really get anywhere. This is why I'm such a believer of intensive counseling and my friends at Restoring the Soul in Colorado, created by my longtime friend Michael Cusick to help couples or individuals experience deep change in half-day blocks over 1 or 2 weeks. Now listen, if you can't wait months or years to get to the bottom of an issue or to experience breakthrough, you need to get in touch with my friend Michael and his extraordinary team of counselors at Restoring the Soul. If you're looking to get out of the rut you're in, but can't wait months or years, call Restoring the Soul today for a free consultation with Michael's staff. Call 303-932-9777 and learn how their intensive counseling process can help you. As a special bonus, just for Typology listeners, make sure to visit www.restoringthesoul.com/typology to download their PDF called 5 Ways Unaddressed Trauma May Be Derailing Your Relationships.
I am a 4 and will be doing fine, and all of a sudden will start feeling bad. How do I get out of that and go on with my day?
Oh, those sweet 4s.
We're familiar with this one,
Oh,
right?
man. 2 4s answering the question, right?
All of a sudden start feeling bad?
Yeah. In psychology, we call that a labile mood state. Labile meaning that emotions are kind of shifting quickly, right? So someone who's really struggling with labile mood states could go from grief to happiness to inspired to tears to laughter, Yep. And sometimes that can be an indication of, some really deep developmental problems, right? That a person's carrying into adulthood. But for someone who is a garden variety neurotic 4, like me, right? We too struggle with shifting mood states, right? Shifting feeling states. So the other day, for example, I started thinking about someone in my friend universe that I really struggle with sometimes, and feelings that don't feel good come up, and I was doing fine, and then this came up, and the feelings started to take over. And what I had to do was, and I do this all the time, when I start to have what I call aversive emotions, I often go, okay, what is that? Like, rather than just being entranced, like in a trance or just on autopilot and letting them run, affecting my mood and behavior for the rest of the day, I can stop and say, and then I ask myself, all right, what's the story behind the feeling?
It's good.
Right? Like what's the story here? And as I paused to think about it in a way that was not self-judging or unkind to myself or critical of myself, just what I call a compassionate, neutral presence. I just step back and I go, okay, what story am I telling myself right now about this person? And I realized what I was feeling was envy. I envied this person's success.
Wow.
I was comparing myself to them. This is all typical 4 behavior.
Sure.
Okay. And what was coming up for me was resentment and anger and envy and kind of, I don't know, just negative feelings toward this person. Right. And when I could observe what was happening, what for me begins to occur is a loosening of the grip of that feeling on me. It doesn't go away right away, but just by recognizing it and actually turning a gaze of compassion toward it.
I love when you say that.
Right? Yeah. Just looking at it like, well, that's what Tiggers do.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? That's what we do as people sometimes. Yeah. And then beginning to say, well, do you want to continue on in this story that you're telling yourself right now, that this person's better than you are, this person's crushed it, you haven't crushed it as much, and they probably were crooked, and that's how they did it. You know what I mean? And then, and actually to do what you just did, which is begin to laugh at the story a little bit.
Yeah.
Not in a mocking way, but just kind of giggle at it and at myself. And then it begins to loosen its grip. Yeah. Right?
Which is some of that compassion, right?
Absolutely. And again, I think 4s need to learn that they are not their emotions. Like, what you feel is not who you are.
That's right.
And if you're a thinking type, just because you think it doesn't make it true.
That's right.
Right? Like, don't believe everything your feelings or thoughts tell you.
That's so good. So you said compassionate, neutral, observer.
Yes.
And then ask the question, feeling bad about what? What is the story underneath that feeling?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to the next one. This is from Kelly. Is there one number that ignores trauma and doesn't remember more than other numbers?
Well, we've talked about this before, right? It's a great question. Very often 7s fall into this category, right? sevens, often when you ask them about painful experiences in the past, traumatic experiences in the past, they have a very selective memory. They'll tend to only think about the positives of the past, or they reframe negatives as positives, right?
Yeah.
Or they just lose touch with the memory altogether. But it's a defense against having to feel the feelings associated with that trauma, because of course sevens are afraid of psychological and emotional distress, because they're actually frightened that once they fall into those negative feelings, they're never going to get out, and there's going to be no one there to support them. And that's why they create this neverland in their brain where it's all about fun, man. It's all about the future. It's never about this moment, right? Where there is the possibility of discomfort.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So I think that sevens definitely are a type that, tends to, avoid thinking about pain and trauma. Anthony?
Yes.
Have you ever seen a kid's product and wish you'd had it as a kid?
Of course, especially these days.
Oh, completely. Well, I want to tell you about this company who makes engaging products for kids of all ages that I wish I'd had when I was a kid. Kiwico.
Okay.
Kiwico creates accessible hands-on projects for kids of all ages designed to make learning about STEAM fun. STEAM stands for science, technology, engineering, art, and math.
All right.
Each crate is designed by experts and tested by kids, offering fun opportunities to learn and explore at home. Delivered monthly, each box comes with all the supplies you need for that month's project, meaning no extra runs to the store, which right now, of course, is a bonus, right?
Absolutely.
Kids love getting mail just for them.
Oh, it's like Christmas every time the mailman comes.
It's a great way to end the school year and kickstart the summer break, knowing they have a package to look forward to each month. For instance, my assistant Wendy has 2 young boys, 7 and 9, and they were so excited to receive their science crate with their names on it.
Oh.
It included all the materials and learning resources to build a mechanical model of the sun, earth, and moon, and they designed their own constellations and made a light-up lantern.
That's amazing.
I want to do it.
Me too.
With Kiwico's hands-on art and science projects, kids can engineer a hydraulic claw. I just love saying it. Hydraulic claw.
Totally.
They can build an animation machine, explore colorful, kid-friendly chemistry, and more.
This is fun.
You'll get everything you need to make STEAM seriously fun, delivered to your doorstep. And just for our Typology listeners, get 30% off your first month plus free shipping on any crate line with the code Typology. That's 30% off your first month at Kiwico, Kiwico.com. Promo code Typology. That's TYPOLOGY.
All right, we have one from Hudson here. What would healing look like for different types after the trauma of a romantic breakup? In my case, a 4.
Oh, well, we'll get to 4 in a second, right?
Right, yeah.
Well, I mean, I do think it's going to look a little bit different for each of the types, right? So I think for example, for a 1, they might stop and ask themselves, what was it that I did wrong? What mistakes did I make? Mm-hmm. There might be a lot of self-criticism and judgment for how they might have failed in the relationship. It's also very possible that the 1 might actually begin to over-focus on the mistakes the other made.
That's what I was thinking of. What 1 would be more likely to do that?
You mean in terms of subtypes?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the self-pres 1 would be the most self-critical.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas the social and the one-to-ones would be,
perhaps critical of the other.
Yeah, to differing degrees.
Mm-hmm.
The one-to-one one would have more access to their anger, whereas the social one would only be half in touch with that anger.
Yeah.
And whereas the self-preservation one would repress the anger, altogether and not express it at all.
Right.
Right.
That's good. What about 2s?
Well, I think for twos in the midst of a romantic breakup, they would, I think have to be careful of rebounding, which is that they would, want to try and get the relationship back, right? Twos they really struggle when a relationship goes south because they're so interpersonal. Relationships are the source of their identity. Their self-esteem is based on the health of their relationships, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm telling you, man, if a relationship goes bad on a two in some way, or if even if there's conflict in a relationship, they want to get up the next morning and fix it fast, right? It's very hard for them to sit in the difficulty of a broken relationship.
What would be a good practice for that too?
Of expressing their own needs and resisting the urge, right? To even capitulate to the other in order to rescue the relationship.
Wow, that's good. All right, let's move on to threes. What might trauma and healing look like around a romantic breakup for the type 3?
I think threes and threes and sevens, and I'll talk about this maybe when we hit there too, is they can move on from these things pretty quickly. You know what I mean? Like they'll say, okay, now, and a three can spin it, right? Not reframe it. That's what a seven might do. But a three can spin it, right? Like, oh, yeah, but I really learned from this. And, and they talk about the relationship in terms of, and then therefore,
the upside.
Yeah, therefore casting themselves as the star.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
The overcomer.
Yeah.
Right? That sort of a thing. I'm not saying it doesn't break their heart.
Sure.
I'm just saying that it's for example, it's hard for threes to get too lost in these negative feelings associated with a breakup because it would stand in the way of their being productive. Because like feelings are messy, man. They slow you down.
Right. Yeah.
And so it might be harder for some threes. The threes might just move on very quickly. From the pain of the broken relationship, because if they stay with the pain too long, it's going to slow them down, and slowing down is not something a three wants to do.
What would a healing look like for the three in that case?
I think being willing to be in the feelings, right? Yeah. Not to move on from them too quickly.
Yeah.
But to let grief and sadness have its way with them.
Yeah.
Even if it means slowing them down and distracting them from over-focusing on getting things done.
Right. That's good. All right. Since there are some similarities between the 3 and the 7 regarding the situation, we've already talked about it. Let's mix it up and go with type 7 now. What might trauma and healing look like for the Enneagram 7 around a breakup?
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say this about sevens, but when they're not very self-aware, they're kind of notorious for moving on from relationships that go south really fast. They can actually, even in relationships that are going well, if a 7 gets bored, sometimes when they meet someone new and it's all new and exciting, they can actually, if it'll feel like to others like they got ditched. Like the 7's attention moved away from them to somebody else.
Right. Yeah.
And they don't call as much. They aren't as social as much. It's like their attention, and so they feel ditched.
Yeah.
Right. 7s at their worst have a narcissistic dimension, meaning that they can sometimes lack empathy. And that makes moving on from a relationship that's broken pretty easy. That said, breakups for 7s are super hard.
Right.
Okay.
I've heard you say this before.
Yeah, in a lot of instances because you can't avoid sometimes the emotional pain that comes with a breakup, the finality of it. Right?
Yeah, no way to escape or reframe the picture.
Right. But they can't put a silver lining on the broken relationship.
Yeah.
And I've watched a 7 who I love go through a breakup, and it's just excruciating to see them squirm with all those difficult feelings. All to say, in some instances, 7s can move on too quickly, right? And bypass the pain and move on to the next exciting thing. Or they get stuck in that pain for a while, which is normal and natural, but scary to the 7.
Yeah.
And it makes the finality of a broken relationship can really wreck a 7 for a while. And if they're smart, they'll stay in that feeling until it's done with them, and it'll just make them deeper, more wonderful human beings.
Which would be a good healing step.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Yeah. All right. How about the 4? Let's go to 4.
Well, now this is going to be super hard for 4s.
Yeah.
Right? Why? Because 4s wrestle. I've never met a 4 that doesn't struggle with feelings of abandonment, even when things are going great and all there. I mean, it's just like a theme that runs through the life of a 4, because the 4 has this memory of some primal early life experience of abandonment. They may not remember what it is, but it's this sense that I was abandoned somewhere, that because of this broken piece, this missing thing inside of me, I got left and I don't know why. And it's just there, And so, I mean, obviously when a relationship breaks up, I think the 4, because of their defense mechanism of introjection, will, number one, think that's 100% my fault.
Right.
This thing went south. It's 100% my fault. Right. Secondly, I think the abandonment will be a big trigger of the more global issue of abandonment in their life, right? Feelings of abandonment and unworthiness. Thankfully, lots of 4s have creative ways of giving expression to the sadness and grief.
Yeah, that's good.
But I think the key for them really is to not over-identify who they are with the suffering.
Yeah. That's good.
Because 4s can become addicted to suffering and actually hold on to it way too long.
Yeah.
And it becomes a burden to them and to other people.
That's good. And of course, this is true of everyone, but the 4 really can use outside help or an outside observer because the 4 tends to be so introspective, right? In terms of the 4 reaching out, what are some things to consider or be aware of?
Yeah, absolutely. The 4 has to be very careful of over-explaining themselves all the time, maybe talking about the suffering too much, just becoming too entangled in it,
Yeah.
And, turning it in many ways can run the risk of turning the whole thing into a melodrama.
Right, yep. All right, how about 5s?
Well, the defense mechanism of 5s is isolation.
Okay.
And I wonder if for 5s in a breakup situation that if they wouldn't go more into isolation than they already do.
Right.
Right. To, 4s, 5s, and 9s are the withdrawing stance. And 5s could really go into withdrawing.
Yeah.
Right. More deeply into themselves. And I think that would be a struggle.
Yeah.
But when a relationship goes south, and also remember this, Anthony, 5s, probably more than any other number, take the greatest risk of moving into a relationship because they're so independent, so self-sufficient, so worried about, sharing private information about themselves. That's not as true, by the way, for 1-to-1 5s, but yes, for self-preservation and social 5s. 1-to-1 5s actually can be very transparent and expect the same level of transparency from their significant other.
Wow.
Okay, so that's a little different.
Interesting.
Right? That's the counter type of the 5. So that's the reason why it looks so different. That said, I think that for 5s, they have to be careful that they don't, make a decision that relationships are unsafe and I can't afford to do it again. Because again, I think that 5s, relationships are a little tougher for them. And when they do make a connection and it doesn't go well, they could go too far into a withdrawing stance.
Hey, Typology Tribe. I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors for helping us bring you what I hope is great content every week. Now, you all know I'm a big proponent of counseling. Whether you feel like something is interfering with your happiness or preventing you from achieving certain goals, counseling is a great tool to help identify what those blocks are and then work through them. Yet finding a therapist can sometimes feel intimidating, but not with BetterHelp. BetterHelp offers online counseling at your own time and your own pace. You can schedule secure video or phone sessions plus text and chat with your therapist when it's convenient for you. These are licensed professional counselors who specialize in things like depression, anxiety, stress, relationships, LGBT matters, trauma, and grief. BetterHelp has counselors available worldwide and have over 3,000 U.S. licensed therapists across all 50 states. In fact, so many people have been using BetterHelp that they are recruiting additional counselors in all 50 states. And get this, If you're not satisfied with your counselor for any reason, you can request a new one at any time at no additional cost. Best of all, it's a truly affordable option. I want you to start living a happier life today. As a listener, you'll get 10% off your first month by visiting betterhelp.com/typologypodcast. Join over 1 million people taking charge of their mental health. Again, that's BetterHelp, HELP.com/typologypodcast. TYPOLOGYPODCAST.
All right, we're back and we've covered the trauma of the breakup for the 5. How about some healing steps for the 5?
Yeah, well, I think, well, they have to get out of the scarcity mindset that there's only so much love in the world, you know?
That's good. Yeah.
And hold on to the abundance mindset that says there's a lot of love to go around. You know what I mean?
That. Yeah, that's really
good.
And
I think that would be a good lesson for 5s.
Yeah. All right, so 6s, we're talking about what would healing look like for different types after the trauma of a romantic breakup. So what does the breakup look like, and then what does healing look like for 6s?
Yeah. Well, in some ways a 6 would say, well, I knew this was going to happen. And I'm ready. I was ready for it when it did happen.
Right.
That said, in the beginning of relationships, 6s tend to question and doubt whether or not the relationship is actually going to last.
Right.
In fact, a 6 can, even when things are going well, the 6 might think, I actually feel worse now because I'm just waiting for the worst to happen.
Yeah.
It's going too well, right? And of course, fear is their passion or deadly sin. And I think the rebound for the 6 is going to mean having courage to enter into a relationship again, right? And not to doubt every relationship too much, right? Remember, 6s are kind of suspicious at first.
Right, yeah.
They worry about other people's motives, other people's agendas, hidden agendas. And so like I said, in those early stages of a relationship, before they really realize that this person is trustworthy, they are very cagey, right? And I would be concerned that a 6 would say, well, this confirms, all my worst fears, right? Yeah. That this relationship was destined to end, and then they would carry that into the next relationship. That would not be great.
Don't make someone else pay the price for a past love gone wrong. All right, we covered 7s. Let's talk type 8s. We're talking trauma and healing around the breakup of a romantic relationship.
Yeah, we covered 7s, right? Well, when a relationship breaks for an 8, if it's an immature 8, I will say this, they will tend to blame the other and not own their own mistakes. Why? Because owning a mistake is a sign of, owning a mistake is a sign of weakness. And being weak is something that the 8 wants to avoid at all costs, right? So that's a really important thing for 8s to remember. But again, I'm describing a not very self-aware 8. A young 8, might be, it's all their fault, it's not my fault.
Right, sure.
It not a great posture, right? Because they're not taking their own inventory and owning their piece, right? I think for 8s, remember, betrayal is a big theme for 8s. They worry about betrayal. It's something that lots of 8s tell me was a big theme for them as a child. And they made a decision after some betrayal that I will never let myself be hurt like this again.
Wow.
And they developed this need to assert strength and control over others in order to avoid having their tender feelings be betrayed, right? So again, betrayal, big theme in the life of an 8. And so when a breakup comes along, they have to make sure they don't tell themselves this is how every relationship ends. Every relationship ends in betrayal, and become more suspicious that others might break their hearts. And remember, 8s have very tender hearts.
They really do have a sensitive heart underneath that sometimes gruff exterior.
Yeah.
All right, and we'll close with the peacemakers. Type 9s, we're talking the breakup of a romantic relationship and the trauma and healing associated with that experience.
Yeah, so, I think when 9s have a breakup, it can be really, really, the word I would use is disequilibrating, right? It really knocks them back on their heels. Remember, 9s want to maintain connections with others at really, they fear disconnection. And that's why they avoid conflict at all costs, right? It's like conflict could lead to disconnection. Therefore, I'm going to do everything I can, right, to avoid it. Also remember that 9s tend to merge with the life agendas of other people. And so they may have become so enmeshed, so fused with that person that now, once that person is gone, they feel at sea.
Ooh,
right?
Yeah,
they feel lost, right? And this is why, by the way, 9s can sometimes stay in relationships far longer than they should.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes, and I hate to say this, but when 9s are not very healthy, they will really endure verbal abuse or worse far longer than any other type will, because they just don't want to rock the boat. It's like and so that's why we would say that sometimes they have a dependent personality.
Yeah.
They become like a 2 can, but for different reasons, kind of codependent and will stay in a relationship way too long.
I remember Mike Pacquiao sharing that he was in a dating relationship,
Right.
and he was like, I stayed months longer than I should have, but I just didn't want to have the conversation.
Exactly right. Yeah. And so what 9s, I think, need to do is to reclaim their ground, differentiate themselves from the other and realize I can be no longer self-erasing, but rather saying I can do life apart from a relationship with this other person. I can be my own person. I can have a real presence in the world apart from this other person. And I think that would be part of the journey of healing for 9s.
That's good. Well, thanks for answering these mailbag questions, Ian.
Yes.
And of course, these questions came from our Typology Institute membership webinar. Tell people how they can get involved.
Yeah, man. And again, I want to remind people they can be part of the Typology Institute membership. They get to be on town halls where we take questions just like this, but live.
Yes.
And we're in conversation with people who are in the membership pool, and it's really fun the nights we do those town halls.
So good. People get to come on, ask their question live, have a conversation with you, a follow-up conversation. So really good. That's typologyinstitute.com/membership.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Ian. All right, folks. I hope you enjoyed this mailbag episode of Typology Podcast. Getting to answer some of your questions. I hope you received some enlightenment. I hope you had a few laughs, connected with us, connected with yourself. Reach out to us on socials. Hope you have a fantastic week. Grace and peace.